I'm here this week with Vanessa Lillie and Gare Bleak Billings, as I'm going to start announcing you. um, and I was scrolling Bookstagram, as all of us do, earlier this month, and I saw that Vanessa is going to be highlighting more than 70, I believe is what the post said, Native or books for Native American Heritage Month. And I was like, we always need to throw more books on people's TBRs. So I was like, would you want to come talk about them? And then I wanted to get Gare's input too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Especially because, like, I have written articles for She Reads, and it was, like, at times a little bit of a struggle to find books when I write about, like, Indigenous stories. And so, like, when I saw your post, I was like, wow, like, I am going to be diving into so many of them. And I'm just super excited to, like, talk about it today.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. This is fun. Yeah, my challenge for myself was to post every day some new titles. And there were about, I think I have around 70 to 80 Indigenous authors. So I'm hoping to post most of them. It's hard to like find a theme or I just posted today, I had to pop into Barnes and Noble because they had 2 special editions of it was the Berry Pickers, which is like a huge book this year. I mean, I think she probably sold, I don't even know, Amanda Peterson. She was her debut. And then The Mighty Red with Louise Erdrich, she's won like a Pulitzer, and she's like, but Barnes and Noble did special editions of both of these Indigenous authors, which, I mean, you got to like celebrate the wins, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see the Berry Pickers everywhere. And you were you mentioned it when we talked about Blood Sisters. And I was like, wow, I'm starting to see it everywhere.
Yeah, I think it like won a new Voices Prize from Barnes and Noble. And they did this cool special edition. So if there's any because you see special editions in romance so much, which of course, but you're seeing them more now in thrillers, which is cool. Or I guess these aren't exactly thrillers, but non-romance, just it's for people who love to collect books. And like Geneva Rose has a cool special edition coming out with the like red edges, I think. I don't know. I just like seeing, I mean, I love romance and romantasy special editions. That's like cool. But I mean, I feel like we all like them in all genres that we read. So it's fun to see that.
Yeah, especially when the special edition looks like it has a little blood splatter on it. I'm like,
it's amazing.
The weight of my heart.
Right?
Those are the vibes I'm looking for in my special
I'm
edition.
like, oh my God, this is immaculate.
I love it.
Yeah. I know. I could go broke with all these special editions coming out lately. I want the Evelyn Hugo one too. It has like the 7 rings around the outside of the pages. But I don't need it. I don't even read physical books. I don't need a second copy of it.
But a special edition, like I feel like a year from now, you're gonna be kicking yourself in the ass. Like, why didn't I just do it?
I know.
Because they're gone, right? Like, kind of once they're sold out, they're sold out.
I think so.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, get lots of special editions.
And then like it'll be online for like $200 to $300. Like I've done that before, where like a special edition like romance that I wanted, I was like, I don't need like 8 copies of this, and then the next thing I know, I don't get the one that I would have paid $40 for, and then when I decide I want it, it's like $200 to $250.
Yikes!
So just always buy all the books is the most important message.
Because the worst thing is that you could be the person that like sells it for $250 if you decide you don't want it later.
Right.
So you're making a profit.
Yeah, it's like an investment basically.
Yeah. It's like crypto.
I love that.
You just get your money back.
Totally like crypto.
Just like crypto. Buying special edition is just like crypto.
Follow me for more financial advice. I mean, I'm here for you.
We're not only a bookish podcast, we are a financial education podcast.
That's right.
So man.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, who wants to go first?
I don't get. Should we do like back and forth? I wonder if we're gonna have some matching books. Are we doing? So these are all Indigenous reads. Is that right?
Yeah, mine are all Indigenous authors.
Okay, so we might have some matches. I'm excited.
Yeah. I'm excited too for my first pick. So maybe I'll just
Mm-hmm.
pop this little puppy in, a book that I've never stopped thinking about.
Oh, this is so good. I'm so happy you
How
did
could I
that.
not? Are you joking? This is like one of my favorite
Yes.
books. I'm obsessed.
I know. I was thinking about it too.
I am so obsessed. Obviously,
For the
Blood
listeners,
Sisters.
he just pulled up Vanessa's
Thank
book and showed it to us.
Yeah.
And now she's holding it up.
Yeah. I was like, well, I obviously have to highlight this one because this was like a reading experience for me where like I started your book and I was like, I'm gonna try to like devour like 100 pages. Oh my god.
I know, it's
Sorry,
so
my dog
sweet.
is here. My son was like, "Can I hear
No.
my dog?" And I'm like, "I'm only in the middle of a podcast." And my dog is here. She wants to hear too, though. Gare, keep going.
Yeah.
She's
So
excited.
this was like one of those situations where I was like, oh, I'm gonna try to read like 100 pages today, like take my time with it, like, you know, like devour every sentence. And then the next thing I know, I'm like up at like 1:00 in the morning and I finish it. It's just so good. And if you don't know what Blood Sisters is about, as an archaeologist for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Sid Walker spends her days in Rhode Island trying to protect the land's indigenous past, even as she's escaping her own. While Sid is dedicated to her job, she's haunted by the night of violence she barely escaped in her Oklahoma hometown 15 years ago. Even though she swore she'd never go back, the past comes calling. When a skull is found near the crime scene of her youth, just as her sister Emma Lou vanishes, Sid knows she must return home. She refuses to let her sister's disappearance or the remains go ignored, as so often happens in cases of missing Native women. But not everyone is glad to have Sid home, and she can feel the crosshairs on her back. Still, the deeper Sid digs, the more she uncovers about a string of missing Indigenous women cases going back decades. To save her sister, she must expose a darkness in the town that no one wants to face, not even Sid. What a frickin' odyssey, my friend.
Yes.
Oh,
Obsessed.
thank
Obsessed.
you.
Oh my
It is
god. There's like,
action-packed too.
I was just gonna say, like, the action in it, I was like,
Yep.
oh my god, butterflies, like nervous stomach. I just am
Yes.
completely obsessed.
I love that because as a reader, I'm such an impatient reader. I want stuff to be happening all the time, and it's so funny because then when you're a writer, you're sitting down, and you're like, okay, you're boring me, writer Vanessa. Get to the action. So there was like, I'm like, I need a car chase here. Like, it was definitely like I had to amp it up for myself as a reader too. So I'm glad you enjoyed the action. It was really fun to write.
It was very fun to read. Like, so growing up with different things happening like on our reservation, I like always assumed it was like an our reservation sort of problem and things that occurred here, but like didn't really realize obviously until I got older that like this is something that happens like throughout all different reservations. Whereas like the missing Indigenous women and how it's like not investigated, how some of the crime that can happen on a reservation is not looked into as much as it would if it would happen off from a reservation. So like when I was reading this, I was like, you know, this really like hits home for me because there were so many things that were happening where like the police weren't called or the police weren't showing up, and I was like, but this is why, like this is exactly her point, you know, without like you can't have a car chase in like Los Angeles or New York City without like you know, so like when it's happening on a reservation, I was like, wow, like it's not just here. And right around the time that I read this, I had watched Wind River, and it just like between your book and watching the end of that movie, I was like, it is horrifying because there's like a little message at the end of the movie that like Indigenous women are the only race that like they actually don't have a number or even like an estimate of how many of them are like missing or murdered because they just no one has really taken care of those statistics.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're only even just getting a language around it. I mean, so Blood Sisters is set in 2008, and the term missing and murdered Indigenous women wasn't even used yet. It's really just within the past few years, and like thank God for social media, because people can share information, and they started to just see, I mean, we know that this is an issue, but it's only when you start communicating it across the board. And TV and film and books are actually a part of that, because it like tells stories that are familiar, and then you can advocate, I think, in a lot of ways. And like, thank God people are talking about it more. Not enough, but more for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's like, I remember like a few years ago, I read The Highway of Tears book by Jessica McDermott.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a huge slap in the face for me to read that and be like, I can't believe for like decades and decades. My mom has a friend who, like, she was out like, I mean, decades ago, she was out with her cousin, and like she went to leave the bar, and the cousin was like, I'm gonna stay behind, and then they found her like she was murdered that night, and they still don't know who did it. And it's just like, I mean, for decades, you know, and it's not really necessarily like there's more coverage and there's more awareness, but like I wouldn't say it's like getting better.
No, because it has to get better at the level of the person who sees their lives as lesser, right? I mean, that's where it has to get. I mean, it's important for the rest of us to sort of advocate for it, but the sickness is in, you know, stereotype and viewing Indigenous women as something that is disposable. Yeah. Which is sort of the view of colonialism in this country for most of its history, right? I mean, that was sort of what was taught, and that erasure and kind of othering. And so that level of, it's really a healing almost that has to take place in order for there to be a respect of life, and for it to happen in these places where for generation after generation, you know, there was no real value put on these women's lives in particular because they were just Indigenous women on a reservation, or, you know, or these like man camps, which was like what Renova was, where they come in and have no regard at all for the community that's there, and just sort of treat it like a trash can, essentially. And so there is a lot of work to do around that. And it's not just certainly Indigenous women. I mean, there's, you know, many women of color. I mean, when you look at statistics of crime solved, and, you know, to be a murdered Black woman versus a murdered white woman, and the likelihood of your crime actually being solved, right? So there's, you know, issues at the heart of all of it. But it's a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I live like I'm like right on the Canadian border, so like the trafficking is like a lot worse here than like some other places, and that's like something that, you know, it's obviously like terrifying and really sad too, because there's a lot more cases where people can just take a boat and be in a different country and, you know, go there illegally, and it's scary.
Yeah, it's really, and, you know, even if there is a crime, again, that like who's responsible, who answers it, you know, I mean, all of those really hard questions. I mean, in the US, you know, the FBI never gets involved unless it's drugs, basically. And so missing women, and like, you know, and like within Blood Sisters, you know, I made her sister have like some drug problems or whatever, because that's sort of the excuse that so often gets used, which is, oh, well, they have a drug problem, they've just ran off. It's like, instead of taking the case seriously, or heaven forbid they have a record or something, it's like, oh, because you committed a crime, suddenly your life doesn't have value. So, yeah, all of those issues come up for sure.
Yeah.
Oh my God, my dog is eating all the plastic. I apologize. He's so crazy. One of my favorite things about Blood Sisters, the paperback, I just have to highlight this because I'm a geek about it, is there's a map. Are you guys map people?
I love a map.
Yeah.
Me too. So there's a map in it of northeastern Oklahoma, and like different landmarks from the book, all like based on real places. You know, I mean, this, you could line this up with northeastern Oklahoma. So that was kind of cool. And then it's got all the different tribal lands, like the Quapaw Nation. And I mean, there's like 7 or 8 here. So that was kind of fun too.
That's really cool.
Just, again, like you don't get maps as much in thrillers, and yet
no, you don't.
They're so awesome. I always want a map.
I always love a map. I always love a map. I'm like horrible with direction, so I'm like, when you say like 5 minutes away, like, and you're like northeast to here, I'm like, okay, give me the map.
No idea what that means. Yeah,
Yeah,
same.
just like, I don't know. Put it in the GPS.
I love it. It's amazing. I should, one last thing, not, I just keep talking about my book. I just always am
You
promoting. No,
should.
but for
Go
people
ahead.
who, I do have a further reading guide in the paperback too. So
Mm.
we'll probably hit on some of these as well, but there's a little list of, I chose all women Indigenous writers, kind of a combo of some thrillers and then a few others. So that's also like a fun thing to check out.
Ooh, I
That's
like that.
very cool.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna need a second edition of that book.
Right.
Let me know. I will mail you one. Just remind me.
I
I know
will
I've got
I
some
will
around
order
here.
one. I will order one.
I mean, I
Friends
don't mind.
friends
Never
support
mind.
friends. God.
Okay, so I have one that's like probably the Indigenous book of the year, which
Okay.
is Never Whistle at Night.
I love
Okay,
that
so
book.
this is a really cool book. So first of all, it's an anthology, which I don't know if do you guys read a lot of short stories?
I
I
haven't.
haven't, not for any reason.
Yeah, I know. Same.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't, but like I'm reading a short story right now and I'm like everything's like going so quickly and I'm like
Mm.
I'm kind of into this. Like I'm
Yeah.
into this kind of feeling of like reading a story that feels like a short like Tales from the Crypt episode, you know, like instead of like
Yes,
a full length movie. So like that's what I kind of compare it to. But yeah,
you can
no,
like
I'm really into
dip
this.
in.
Yeah.
I actually just on USA Today, the bestseller list. I was just looking today, and there's actually a new queer anthology that just came out. I was like, oh,
Ooh.
I'm gonna have to pick that up. But so Never Whistle at Night was put together by two Indigenous writers, so Shane Hawk and Theodore Van Alst Jr. And so they basically worked with Vintage, who put this out, and they did a combination of more well-known, more established Indigenous authors with first time ever being published Indigenous authors or writers,
That's
really. Was such a cool idea. But there's a couple like names you guys might like. Well, Tommy Orange, who of course did like There and Wandering Stars.
Mm-hmm.
And then David Heska Wanabli Wyden, who did Winter Counts, which is one of the books I brought too. Like he has a story in there. Nick Medina, who I have one of his to talk about in a minute too. So there's like these, a little more well-known authors, but it's so nice because then you get brand new voices. So this collection, it's like 30 stories. It's, not super long. So they're pretty short and sweet. But what's so cool is that you can just really dip in and you maybe meet a new Indigenous author and you're like, oh, that was a really cool story. And then you can kind of go check out their backlist. But this has been on the indie bestseller list for like 60 weeks.
Wow.
It was on USA Today still. I was just reading the list, and it was still on there. So this is pretty much, I would say, one of the better selling. Actually, this and I bet The Berry Pickers actually is another title that's been an absolute bestseller this year. So this is a great one, and it's paperback, and the cover is really vibrant, and it's fun to just, like just have on hand whenever you're in the mood to just read something quickly. And each of them are obviously from different tribes, so you just get, maybe this is a Cherokee, myth here and a something here, and you just get tastes of these, individual experiences from all over, the continent really, because there's Canadian as well. So that's really cool.
Ugh, I have to check that out. I love the title too. Like that is like so intriguing.
Yes, connected to the sort of legend around, you don't whistle at night. A lot of tribes sort of, say it's dangerous, calls in the spirits.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds so good. I need to check that out. Well, one of mine was a book that The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Probably, yeah. Yeah. Obsessed with the cover. Yes. And it is so good. It's 4 Native American men who, after a disturbing event from their youth, puts them in a desperate struggle for their lives. They're being tracked by an entity bent on revenge. The childhood friends are helpless as the culture and traditions they left behind catch up with them in a violent, vengeful way. So this was actually like one of my first like horror novels that I read.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was completely like terrified and disturbed the entire time because like growing up here, like there were so many like native urban legends that like I, again, like naively thought that this was like solely like our reservation is haunted. None of the other. So then like reading this and like seeing some of like the native like legends that like, are based on like different tribes or some of like the different like, native like things like you said, like never whistle at night. And just like seeing some of like those things, it's kind of like there are so many like urban legends and like superstitions around like native culture that like people don't like fully realize, like they say like if a bird poops on your head that like people are like, oh, that's good luck, but there's like, like completely something different in like Native American culture when it comes with like birds. So like,
or like owls, like
yes.
seeing an owl, a lot of
yes,
which I love owls, so I never loved that one, but yeah, owls are like bad omens and bad luck.
yeah, and like that's like I like still like, I mean, nothing's ever like horrible has happened me personally, but like there'll be a lot of times where I'm taking my dog out at night and I can like hear an owl like very loudly, and I'm like, oh my god, not now. But no, like it was just like a fun read because like there's so many like terrifying things like growing up. Like there's a road by me, and they said that there's a lady that lives in the corn husks, and like if you drive your car a certain speed down the road when it's dark out, you can see her running along your car in the corn field. There's like shapeshifters, like
that's really big in Upper Peninsula. I was reading some Reddit threads about shapeshifters.
Yeah, and like
they were so scary.
And skinwalkers.
Oh,
and
skinwalkers too.
TikToks of those.
Yeah, like my friend Tyler is native as well, and like he like will not even like that like terrifies him to like no end. Like he won't even like say it out loud because it's just like,
I mean there is a thing around even saying it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I have a relative who like was walking home one night and she like saw like the like where the moon like was across the field. She could see somebody like walking like on two legs, and then they like all of a sudden went to four and just started like running. And I was like, no, I don't. You do not.
Thank you.
You do not find me at night. No.
No. I in Blood Sisters, I just wrote a little bit about the spook light, which is in northeastern Oklahoma, which I've seen, and it's been documented by the Army, all kinds of things for decades. But it's just sort of a floating orb, so that's eerie. And it will split. It'll go through your car. I mean, it's unexplainable.
Yeah. The only one I don't even know if I could like fully say I experienced it was there's like a legend around here that there's this like Bigfoot sort of entity that like smells really, really bad and is like covered head to toe in hair. And it sounds like a woman screaming. So when you go to try to help the woman that is screaming, you run into this thing and, you are attacked. And the only time I've experienced that is like when I was at a friend's house, like near the woods, and I could hear a woman screaming, and I like did not say goodbye. I just grabbed my car keys and like got in my car and I drove like back to my house. But like that's the only thing that like I've experienced thus far. But I'm also like, if I hear something like that, like I'm not going into the woods. I'm not driving down the road looking into the corn husks. I'm just like, I will listen to your story and I will keep my ass at home.
You would not be a good main character of a horror novel. You're like the novel's done at chapter 1. You like get your shit and you just pack it up and you leave.
Yes.
No, I would not. I had like a very strange issue earlier this week where I saw like a man walking with like a metal baseball bat down the sidewalk of my friend's house, and I was like trying to get his attention to be like what is that? And he was like, no, you don't call me to the window, you get your ass in the house and lock the door. So like he was like, if this were a scary movie, like you would be Drew Barrymore in a heartbeat. And like that's probably more like my luck is like just like not realizing something's dangerous until I'm dead. Yep.
Yeah.
Love it.
I would not survive the beginning of a novel.
I'm such a chicken. I wouldn't either. Another good horror novel that I highly recommend is Cree. She's Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
I loved this book, and let's see. Here's a little bit about it. So, it's supernatural horror. When Mackenzie wakes up with a severed crow's head in her hands, she panics. Only moments earlier, she has been fending off masses of birds in a snow-covered forest. In bed, when she blinks, the head disappears. Night after night, Mackenzie's dreams return her to a memory from before her sister Sabrina's untimely death. A weekend at the family's lakefront campsite, long obscured by a fog of guilt. But when the waking world starts to close in, a murder of crows stalks her every move around the city, and she wakes up from a dream of drowning, throwing up water, and she gets threatening text messages from someone claiming to be Sabrina. Mackenzie knows this is more than she can handle alone. Traveling north to her rural hometown in Alberta, she finds her family still steeped in the same grief that she ran away from to Vancouver to escape. They welcome her back, but their shaky reunion seems to intensify her dreams and to make them more dangerous. What really happened at night at the lake, and what did it have to do with Sabrina's death? Only a bad Cree would put their family at risk. But what if whatever has been calling Mackenzie home was already inside?
This sounds
Terrifying.
so like scary and good. Those are the best words
It's
I have.
really, yeah, and she's a great writer, so it moves, but it's so creepy. Like I loved it, and I've been seeing it a lot too. I think it's been really resonating with booksellers and people. Like it's I feel like it's building. So
Nice.
yeah, Bad Cree by Jessica Johns is great.
I've been seeing it everywhere as well, and I am so intrigued. I'm obsessed with that cover, first of all.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I am so intrigued
cool.
because it sounds so like intricate, but I'm also like, this might be the thing that like causes me to not sleep for a week.
Right?
It's possible.
I'm like, I don't know. I'm like very intrigued by it though. I think I just have to like read it only during the daylight.
Well, that opening sentence, like she wakes up with a severed crow's head in her hands and panics. I was like, well, yeah, I would too.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I've been having bird issues lately where like I'll be outside and it'll be like completely silent, and then like the next thing you know there's like 30 to 50 crows like swarming around me and like in the trees and stuff, and I'm like, I don't want to see a crow anytime soon. So if I wake up with the crow's head in my hand tonight,
it's a problem.
Yeah, no crows for me. I want to highlight a book that I just received an ARC of. So this doesn't come out until March of 2025, but I feel like I have to talk about it because it sounds so good. It is called The Haunting of Room 904 by Erica T. Worth. I'm so excited for this. That cover is sick. And she is basically somebody who has like a reputation of being like a gritty, punkish voice in horror. And this one is about Olivia Becente, who was never supposed to have the gift. The ability to commune with the dead was the specialty of her sister, Nashi. But when the sister dies unexpectedly and under strange circumstances, somehow Olivia suddenly can't stop seeing and hearing from spirits. A few years later, she's the most in-demand paranormal investigator in Denver. She's good at her job, but the loss of her sister haunts her. That's when she hears from the Brown Palace, a landmark Denver hotel. The owner can't explain it, but every few years, a girl is found dead in room 904, no matter what room she checked into the night before. As Olivia tries to understand these disturbing deaths, the past and present collide as her investigation forces her to confront a mysterious and possibly dangerous cult, a vindictive journalist, betrayal by her friends, and shocking revelations about her sister's secret life. So
I literally just requested that on NetGalley as you were speaking. That sounds
it
amazing.
Sounds so good. Being able to like communicate with spirits is something that I don't often see a lot in like Indigenous writing. But I'm excited to read more stories from that perspective, because that's something that I've always been very intrigued by.
And Erica's debut was White Horse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that
Yeah.
was a really cool, also kind of a sister. Well, it was her mother who had passed. And there's like a special bracelet that connected them. And it was also set in Colorado. So that's where, I think that's where Erica's from. So that's really cool.
Yeah. I'm excited to read that one. I just got it this week and then I was like, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah, that's a hot galley right there.
Yeah.
It is.
Hot off the press.
So I have another paranormal kind of investigator vibe, Shudder by Ramona Emerson.
Ooh.
So it's a series. The second one just came out. So Shudder's the first one. The second one is called Exposure. And so it's about, so Rita is a forensic photographer working for the Albuquerque police force. Her excellent skills have cracked many cases. She is almost supernaturally good at capturing details. In fact, Rita has been hiding a secret. She sees the ghosts of crime victims who point her toward the clues that other investigators overlook. As a lone portal to the living world for traumatized spirits, Rita is terrorized by nagging ghosts who won't let her sleep and who sabotage her personal life. Her taboo and psychologically harrowing ability was what drove her away from the Navajo reservation, where she was raised by her grandmother. It has isolated her from friends and gotten her in trouble with the law, and now it might be what gets her killed. When Rita is sent to photograph the scene of a supposed suicide on a highway overpass, the furious, discombobulated ghost of the victim, who insists she was murdered, latches onto Rita, forcing her on a quest for revenge against her killers. And Rita finds herself in the crosshairs of one of Albuquerque's most notorious cartels. Written in sparkling, gruesome prose, Shudder is an explosive debut from one of crime fiction's most powerful new voices.
Sounds so good.
It's great. And I think it was, I think this is kind of the first edition. I believe she won at least a couple awards for Shudder. And she's a Dene writer, or Navajo. So it's cool because she, writes about her tribe and her community, and there's a lot of flashbacks in this, which is really nice. And so you get a lot of the kind of cultural richness, as well as the like great hook of talking to spirits to solve crimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I just want to read it like horror for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
I know. I've read I read Leave the Girls Behind by Jacqueline Bublitz, and that had somebody who like communicates with the dead. And Please See Us by Caitlin Mullen has like a clairvoyant, and so like that combined with like Indigenous culture, I feel like would be really good, because I've never really been like a paranormal person, but like when it's like in a story in that sort of sense, it's very intriguing to me. So like now I need to read that. It sounds so good. Sounds so good.
We're just always in spooky season. It is always spooky.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. 100%. I either want to feel like depressed and like bleak at the end of the story, or I want to be like terrified. I want to be like sad or scared.
Yeah. That's right. Those are the vibes.
Those are my only vibes. Like a happy ending, I'm like, oh God.
How traditional.
No, that sounds so good. I'm adding all of these to my Goodreads too, as you bring them up, because I mean, just great taste. Well, one of mine is one that you mentioned earlier. It's Winter Counts by David Haska Wambley Whedon. Um, it's just so good. It's Virgil Wounded Horse is the local enforcer on the Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Dakota. When justice is denied by the American legal system for the tribal council, he's hired to deliver his own punishment, the kind that's hard to forget. When heroin makes its way into the reservation and finds Virgil's nephew, his vigilantism suddenly becomes personal. He enlists the help of his ex-girlfriend and sets out to learn where the drugs are coming from and how to make them stop. They follow a lead to Denver and find that the drug cartels are rapidly expanding and forming new and terrifying alliances. Back on the reservation, a new tribal council initiative raises uncomfortable questions about money and power. As Virgil starts to link the pieces together, he must face his own demons and reclaim his native identity. Another like action-packed story. But I loved this one because, again, it was like the issues with drugs on reservations is more prominent throughout different reservations instead of just like specific ones. And I also loved like reading more of like a political thriller between the like the Indian Council and then the American legal system. And obviously he did a ton of research, or he like knows everything there is.
He does know.
Yeah,
he's a professor. Like he had an op-ed even in the New York Times around the McGirt decision, which was in Oklahoma, that basically allowed for like the Cherokee Nation and other nations to take control again of what they were legally by treaty were supposed to have as their nations, but were taken away. And I don't begin to understand all of it, but David was like writing about it, you know, from a like professor standpoint, which is, you can feel it in the book, right? It's like
100%.
He knows his stuff. It's like you know, because Virgil, the main character, is there because the legal system is failing, because terrible things are happening on the reservation that either the FBI or local enforcement don't care about because it doesn't warrant their attention. And so he has to come in to met justice for a price. It's like his job. But to understand that, because it's really complex, and David in this book, I agree, really does a good job of sort of making it actiony, like a guy like seeking justice, but then you get a sense of the real legal ramifications of when this isn't done well. Like, you know, children, families are really hurt because of injustice.
Yeah. And he does an exceptional job at like explaining things with like how much he knows about them, but also kind of like dumbing it down a little bit for us who like don't know a lot about like the American legal system. So I was just like, wow, because I've never really read a story like that before. Like I usually don't read like political or legal thrillers, and with that one I was just like, wow, like I was like into it the entire time, and it was like enraging but like also like extremely informative as well. But yeah, it's just like an incredible story.
I did an event with David. I live in Providence, where Brown University is, and he had, I think, a month-long residency there. And so we did an event together, and I was really lucky for me because I got to hear the first chapter of the sequel to Winter Counts, which is coming out, I think, in 2025.
Oh my God.
And it was really good. And so Virgil's back, is my point.
Good.
Get caught up, everybody.
Yeah.
I think the sequel should be coming out in the next year. So that's exciting.
That's definitely one that I read, and I was like, I immediately want more from that character.
Yeah.
Like Sid Walker. Like my girl said.
Oh, thank you. Oh God, I'm editing the sequel right now.
God.
I'm excited. Thanks. Yeah. Well,
I've been like thinking about it like a lot, and I'm like, I don't know if it was you. There was like something where like it was announced on social media that Sid Walker was going to be like a series. Like Blood Sisters was not a standalone. And so I've just been like thinking about it, because like I have my shelf right here of like, these are like my favorites, like the books that I think about very often, and she's about number 4 in, because 4 is my lucky number, and I just sometimes look at her spine and I think of my girl Sid.
Thank you. That means a lot in the depths of edits right now, so I'm trying to do justice by her. She's in a little trouble. So
Well, I'm
We
very
love it.
excited to hear that.
thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping, in the next month or two we'll do like a cover thing. Like I know they've started on some concepts, and we'll
Mhm.
do, a big enough. It's supposed to be the end of October, 2025 again. So
Mhm.
should be
Nice.
fun.
That's exciting.
So I got another kind of thriller. So Marcy Rendon has an amazing series. It's the Cash Black Bear series. And I believe there are three books. It's an award-winning series, and I think there are three. She's maybe working on the fourth right now. So she
Mhm.
wrote this great series, but this is her first standalone. This was a Target book club pick too. So here's a little bit more. It's Where They Last Saw Her is her new standalone. So Quill has lived on the Red Pine Reservation in Minnesota her whole life. She knows what happens to women who look like her. Just a girl when Jimmy Sky jumped off the railway bridge and she ran for help. Quill realizes now that she's never stopped running. As she trains for the Boston Marathon early one morning in the woods, she hears a scream. When she returns to search the area, all she finds are tire tracks and a single beaded earring. Things are different now for Quill than when she was a lonely girl. Her friends Punk and Galen are two women who don't know what it means to quit. And her loving husband, Crow, and their two beautiful children challenge her to be better every day. So when she hears a second woman has been stolen, she is determined to do something about it, starting with investigating the group of men working the pipeline construction just north of their homes. As Quill closes in on the truth about the missing women, someone else disappears. In her quest to find justice for all of the women of the reservation, she is confronted with the hard truths of their home and the people who purport to serve them. When will she stop losing neighbors, friends, and family? As Quill puts everything on the line to make a difference, the novel asks searing questions about bystander culture, the reverberations of even one act of crime, and the long-lasting trauma of being considered invisible.
That's a
It's
really great synopsis, even.
I know. I
it hits a
was.
lot of things. I mean,
Have you read it? You
mhm,
did. So it's on my
yeah.
TBR, and I was going to discuss it tonight to see if you had read it because I can't stop staring at the cover. It sounds so good. It sounds like there's so much going on, and I was going to ask you if you read it, but like now this just solidifies that like I will be picking it up.
I read
It
it too. It was I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
the community piece, right, of the women like supporting
Mhm.
each other is so strong in it. I mean, there's crime and pain in that way, but I love that she had built this community, and her husband is great. And there's some. It's a dark story, would you say, Kate? But it's got a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
hope and community in it.
Yeah, her
Mhm.
friends are like they're still in my mind too. They're very like distinct. Like all three, I think it's three of them kind of.
Mhm.
Like I just like remember like they were just so unique and memorable together.
Mhm.
Oh,
And
I
I
can't
think you'll
wait.
probably read it in like a day, Gare. Like did you read it
Yeah.
fast? I read it really fast.
Yeah, I think I read it on a weekend.
Yeah, her writing's really
And
crisp.
it's
Like,
cold.
yeah, it's
Yes.
seasonally.
So I
Yeah.
read it when when it was like still way too hot in like September, and I was like, "Fuck it, I'm reading a book that has snow."
Yeah, you
So
put it on my radar with our anticipated fall reads
yeah,
Okay.
in like August, I think.
hmm
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that
I
cover
know.
just caught my eye on NetGalley immediately.
I gotta jump over to Canada and see if they have it in stock for them.
Yeah,
That's my closest bookstores in Canada, so I gotta
Oh,
like
cool. Yeah.
hop
Well,
over.
sometimes you get different covers too, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah, and a lot of
hmm
things come out in paperback instead of
That's nice.
hardcover, which
That's
is
hmm
nice.
yes, which is nice for me. I do not
Mm-hmm.
know if I like tear the dust jacket, I will be pissed for life.
yeah.
It's always like getting caught on my sweater or my dog. um, which two things I always have is a sweater and a dog.
Yes.
But I am not a huge nonfiction reader. But I do want to highlight The Highway of Tears by Jessica McDiarmid. I did mention this one earlier, but like I think that for anyone who isn't like fully aware of some of the issues with the missing and murdered Indigenous women and the Highway of Tears specifically in British Columbia, this is a really, really good nonfiction book, because the thing that I really respect about her as a journalist and as a writer is that this was not one of those clues where it was like, here's victim number one, here's victim number two, here's why we think they're correlated. And I feel like a lot of times, especially with crimes against women, it is more so about like, here are these horrible things that happened to these women, and here's how we connected it to find this guy. But it's not like, this woman was a mother, this woman was a sister, this woman was like somebody's best friend, their daughter. And with a lot of the victims in this story, she actually like interviewed their families and like talked about like who they were as like a human being before they went missing or were found murdered. So Highway of Tears is a searing account of the missing and murdered Indigenous women of Highway 16 and an indictment into the society that failed them. For decades, Indigenous women have gone missing or have been murdered along an isolated stretch on Highway 16 in northern British Columbia. The highway is known as the Highway of Tears, but has come to symbolize a national crisis. Journalist Jessica McDiarmid investigates the devastating effect of these tragedies have had on the families of the victims and their communities, and how systemic racism and indifference have created a climate where Indigenous women are over-policed, yet underprotected. Through interviews with those closest to the victims, mothers and fathers, siblings and friends, McDiarmid offers an intimate first-hand account of their loss and relentless fight for justice. Examining the historically fraught social and cultural tensions between settlers and Indigenous people in the region, McDiarmid links these cases to others across Canada, now estimated to a number up to 4,000, contextualizing them with the broader examination of the undervaluing of Indigenous lives in the country. Yeah, it's just extremely sad and very powerful, but like, you know, the fact that this has been going on for decades on this one road in British Columbia, and it's up to, that was years ago. I think I read this in maybe 2018 or 19, so like 4,000 is probably a lot higher now.
Yeah.
But it's just such an incredibly powerful story, and I feel like it's definitely one that like should have the same amount of popularity as like I'll Be Gone in the Dark. You know, like her writing is just fantastic, and the way that she, you know, includes these interviews, it was just a very tough but important read.
Yeah, the voice to the victims, which actually just made me think of Bright Young Women, because the idea that it's not just about the killer, it's about the women who are a part of the story and should lead the story. And that's wonderful, especially with true crime, because you really can get away from that pretty easy.
Yeah. That's what I get frustrated with when I watch like any documentaries. It's like, oh, like here's Jessica. She was this, you know, college student, and she had like a boyfriend, and you know, she was 22, and then they move on. You know, like you don't really like it's not about like them as a person. It's about like what the world and people and community have lost with, you know, this one person. So I think that Jessica McDiarmid did a fantastic job with that, because it's something that I don't really see a lot in true crime. I cried a lot when I read that book.
Oh, I bet.
And I'm not a crier.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard not to. But yeah, it's a really good book.
I've got 2 left.
Okay, I have 1 left.
Okay, so Never Name the Dead. So this book came across my desk because I judged the Edgar Awards, which are through Mystery Writers in America, and the Mary Higgins Clark. That was such a fun opportunity. They just send you tons of books and you read them, and then you kind of meet as a committee and pick out favorites. And so this is one of the ones that, you know, came to the top. It's D.M. Rowell, Never Name the Dead. And just a little bit about it. Actually, it's compared to Winter Counts, which makes sense now that I'm thinking about it. So no one called her mud in Silicon Valley. There she was May, a high-powered professional who had left her Kiowa roots behind a decade ago. But a cryptic voice message from her grandfather, James Sawpole, telling her to come home sounds so wrong that she catches the next plane to Oklahoma. She never expected to be plunged into a web of theft, betrayal, and murder. Mudd discovers a tribe in disarray. Fracking is damaging their ancestral lands. Kiowa families are being forced to sell off their artifacts, and frackers have threatened to kill her grandfather over his water rights. When Mudd and her cousin Denny discover her grandfather missing, accused of stealing the valuable Jefferson Peace Medal from the tribe museum, and stumble across a body in his workroom, Mudd has no choice but to search for answers. Mudd sets out into the wildlife refuge, determined to clear her grandfather's name and identify the killer. But Mudd has no idea that she's about to embark on a vision quest that will involve deceit, greed, and a charging buffalo, or that a murderer is on her trail.
This sounds so action-packed. Like,
Yeah,
I'm here for all the fast-paced ones.
Yeah.
it was. And I loved the buffalo thing's funny. My
Yeah.
Uncle Ray had a buffalo in Welch, Oklahoma.
Oh my gosh.
I'm obsessed.
His name was Charlie,
Oh.
and he would escape all the time and terrorize the town.
It's just the local buffalo.
I love Charlie.
I know. So I love that it's set in Oklahoma, where I'm from, and I love that there is also a buffalo. And also the tribal issues are really important too. But sometimes it's just the little things that you connect with. And I was like, this should be an award-nominated book for a lot of reasons. One of them is the buffalo.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Oh, I love it. I need to read that one too. God.
It's a fast read.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't look too chunky either.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are into chunky books,
Uh-oh.
I have On the Savage Side,
yes.
Tiffany McDaniel. Not necessarily a Indigenous story, but she is an Indigenous author, and I just feel like I can't talk about like Indigenous authors without mentioning, because this is one of my favorite books in the entire world, and I am completely obsessed with her voice. I'm terrified to read Betty, so I've only read this.
Okay.
I haven't read Betty yet because everyone is like, you're gonna like be depressed for days.
Yeah, it's gonna rip you to shreds, my friend.
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, well, I've heard things, but like, I do own it. I do have Betty. She's around here somewhere, but I just am too nervous to read her just yet. I have to be like, I have to win the lottery first, or have something like exceptional happen in my life that cannot tear me down. But this one is loosely based on the unsolved murders of the Chillicothe Six. It is about twin sisters Daffodil and Arcade, who were born 1 minute apart. With their fiery red hair and thirst for an escape, they forge an unbreakable bond nurtured by both their grandmother's stories and their imaginations. Together, they create a world where a patch of grass reveals an archaeologist's dig. The smoke emerging from the local paper mill becomes the dust rising from wild horses galloping on the ground, and an abandoned 1950s convertible transforms into a time machine that can take them anywhere. When the two sisters can't escape their generational chaos that grips their family, growing up in the shadow of the town, the sisters cling to one another. As an adult, Arcade wrestles with these memories of her life, just as local woman is discovered drowned in the river. Soon more bodies are found. While her friends disappear around her, Arcade is forced to reckon with the past while a killer circles ever closer. Arcade's promise to keep herself and her sister safe becomes increasingly desperate when their powerful riptide on the Savage Side becomes more difficult to resist. So it's set in Ohio, and I just remember like this being like one of the most addictive but bleak stories that I have ever read, and her writing is just incredible, and I absolutely love her. And I think I had like 3 or 4 copies of this one. Like I just like, if I see it somewhere, I'm like, oh, you're coming home with me, little angel baby. Like I have to pick it up. So yeah, On the Savage Side is just one of my favorites.
I'm adding that to my TBR because Betty destroyed me. But yeah, I was reading about, because her family is Cherokee, and so she traces her lineage. I think they're from like Arkansas and Oklahoma. So she has a lot of information about that side of her family in regards to Betty, because Betty is sort of a little bit taken from her real family stories. But I loved her writing. Like, she's an incredible writer. So
Yes.
I got to check that out.
Oh, you will love it. You will love it. It is just so, so, so dark and like very emotional, and like at times like you're so wrapped up in her characters that like something happens and you're like, oh right, I forgot that this is an actual like crime fiction story. Like a body shows up and a body shows up and you're like, oh shit, that's right, like there's something, you know, sinister brewing around here, but you're so like wrapped up in the sisters that like you can't really like step away from their relationship, which I really, really liked because again, very character driven.
I love it. So I have And Then She Fell by Alicia Elliott, another Canadian author. So this is, I would sort of call this a literary thriller. It's also like a new mom thriller, which, you know, as a new mom, when I was, I'm not anymore, but when I was, I wrote a thriller. So it's nice to be seen in that way about the hard side of it.
Yeah.
So on the surface, Alice is exactly where she thinks she should be. She's just given birth to a beautiful baby girl, Dawn. Her charming husband, Steve, a white academic whose area of study is conveniently her own Mohawk culture, is nothing but supportive. And they've moved into a new home in a posh Toronto neighborhood. But Alice could not feel like more of an imposter. She isn't connecting with her daughter, a struggle made even more difficult by the recent loss of her own mother, and every waking moment is spent hiding her despair from Steve and their ever-watchful neighbors, among whom she's the sole Indigenous resident. Even when she does have a minute to herself, her perpetual self-doubt hinders the one vestige of her old life that she has left, her goal of writing a modern retelling of her creation story. Then, as if all of that wasn't enough, strange things start to happen. She finds herself losing bits of time and hearing voices she can't explain, all while her neighbor's passive-aggressive behavior begins to morph into something far more threatening. Though Steve assures her this is all in her head, Alice cannot fight the feeling that something is very, very wrong, and that in her creation story lies the key to her and Dawn's survival. She just has to finish it before it's too late. So this is creepy. It's also a little bit funny. The main character's voice is kind of wry and like there's an awareness to it that's really good. But it's got trauma, sort of like false allyship. I mean, how funny is this idea of her husband being an expert, a white academic expert in her own culture?
Yeah.
Wild.
Like that right there. I was like, well, I'm going to read that.
Yeah.
So she just, I actually am blurbed on the back. I love this book, and I just think what she did is so cool. And like if you like kind of interesting structures, like there's like text messages, you know, in it, and then she like titles the chapters in funny ways, like Auntie Bling can't solve everything. Like it's just she just puts everything in it, you know, like it's just so thoughtful. And she's working on this creation story that's, you know, harkening back to her own culture, meanwhile trying to like live a life and be a mom. And there's so many things in it, and I just felt like, you know, you read a book sometimes and you're like, they just left everything on the map. Like she just went there on every single front and just put it all in there. And that's sort of how I felt reading this book. It's like a little quirky, it's dark, and she just didn't pull any punches. And I love that in a thriller, because there's a real space for it, because there's a lot of big issues, especially Indigenous writing. So I really loved it. And also the cover, this is the hardback.
Cover is beautiful.
Yeah, I think the Canadian version might even have the different one.
I have an arc of that too.
It's really pretty.
Here. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I think that is it creepy? I can't remember. There's one that's almost like is it a monster?
Oh yeah,
anyway,
I see this.
They did a couple
like
different
trees around her face.
Yes, kind of. Like trees around the face. It looks really different than the American cover.
Oh yeah, mine's the American cover.
definitely creepier
but
looking.
I need to
Yeah.
dive into this.
Yeah, that
It's
sounds
cool.
really good.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned earlier, if you want a story about a new mother, I just want to let everybody know that this is also available. Little Voices
Oh,
by Homegirl.
my debut baby.
For the
Yes.
listeners, he's holding up Little Voices.
And also, if you love that, then you can read For the Best by
Ah.
He has all of them. He's prepared.
I told you,
You
I have
guys
my
are
favorite
amazing.
shelf. I have my
Thank
favorite
know.
shelf right here.
That means a lot. I was just thinking about that crazy Jules character from For the Best the other day. She's such a train wreck. That's so fun. Thank you.
You were
Memory
like the definition of Kate and I talk often about how you will read, the synopsis of the back of a book, and you're like, oh, like I think I know where the story is like going, or like I think I know what this is about, but like you were like the definition for me of like when I think I know what a story is going to be about, and then like it just like going in like so many different directions that I like was not prepared for it. So
Yeah.
that's something that I always like. Well, be like, that's my girl.
Yes.
I was raised on soap operas. I watched Days of Our
Nice.
Lives, and I feel like I like a bonkers story.
Yes. I like that as part of the backstory, the soap operas.
But like I just like never really know what's like going to happen in your books, and they go in like so many different directions that like it's such an adventure. And like one thing I can say is like not only is your writing fantastic and your plots are like crisp to a T, but you also like really deliver an amazing plot that will keep somebody addicted from cover to cover. So that's something that I always appreciate you.
Well, that means a ton. When I go back to my edits after this, I'm gonna feel so good. I'm
Put it
gonna
on
think
repeat.
of
I
you
will be
guys.
I will be like your hotline bling, like when you need like a little pep talk.
Yeah, seriously. I know. It's crazy. It's writing and putting yourself out there anyway, a podcast episode, anything. There's such a vulnerability to it. And so I do like deeply appreciate that, because I'm right in the thick of it, but it's fun. I'm
Yeah.
excited to share the next one with you guys. I missed Sid. It's been fun to sort of, visit her. It's only 3 months after Blood Sisters closed. It's right after.
Nice.
Good. I'm excited.
Mal's still
I'm
pregnant.
so excited.
Yeah. So it'll be fun.
I know it will be.
I haven't
And fast paced.
I haven't seen this one on your TBR, or I don't know if I couldn't see it very well in your stack of books, but have you heard of Venco?
I've heard of it. I have not. That author has escaped me. I need everyone. It's witchy. I mean, hello, Indigenous witchy. That's like all the things. Have you had a chance to read it, or is it on your TBR?
I haven't. I really want to read it, and it came out February. And I think it was like one of those things where like life kind of just like took over. But I love that the title is Coven, basically.
Yes.
And it says that there's a cantankerous grandmother named Stella. So like any sassy grandmother in a book about witches, I feel like I have to read this. But yeah, it deals with the magic of Indigenous ancestors, and I don't know, I'm very intrigued. It says that it deals with witches, magic, and a road trip across America.
Wow.
So,
I mean, sold. Absolutely.
Yeah. I really want to check that one out.
I might audiobook that. That sounds kind of fun. I wonder.
Yeah. I know, you're making me like broaden my horizons.
So pretty too.
With supernatural and
I know.
Action.
Get a little spooky.
Yeah.
Spooky. I just read Return to Midnight by Emma Dews, and I finished it Sunday, I think, and I had a nightmare Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. So I've woken up at between 2 and 3 in the morning for 3 nights straight, like believing that somebody's like murdering me in my sleep. Like convinced that there's like somebody standing over me. Or like I hear somebody walking in my house. Very strange. Very strange.
He owes you some hours of sleep. That's
She
Mhm.
like
that's an author doing their job. My goodness.
Yeah.
yeah, she like terrified the hell out of me. And then like the
The-
weird thing is like I think it was last night. I woke up around like 2 or 3 and like thought like I was like convinced that there was someone in my house and that like I was just not going to
Oh,
be at work the next day. And then like when I woke up this morning, I looked on like Twitter and somebody was like, why are all of my friends telling me that everybody woke up between 2 and 3 in the morning last night? And I was
damn.
like, did they all read Emma? I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, that
I'm
twist
gonna-
at the end is one of the creepiest to me. Anytime, I'm speaking vaguely, but anytime that is the solution, I'm creeped out for days.
I talked to her briefly because
Mhm.
I obviously like tagged her in a bunch of shit and I was like, I'm sorry that I'm just like blowing up your Instagram and your DMs right now, but like I just, and I told her it reminds me of like a combination of so many like horror movies that I enjoy, but it also like there are so many elements in it that remind me of the case of those Idaho students that were murdered a couple years ago. And she was like, so the weird thing is that I wrote this, like I came up with this story in 2021 and I sold it in 2023.
Whoa.
So like anything that is like correlated or like you think could connect or is like based off is like pure coincidental. And there's like so much in it that I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Crazy.
It's terrifying from cover to cover. Like just like unsettling.
Isn't Ashley Winstead's new book loosely inspired by the Idaho murders too?
I know that like it sounds like it could be, but I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's about college students that were murdered in Idaho and how like these internet sleuths kind of take over everything. So
That's a fair assumption.
I don't know if like she's like came out and said it, but like I was like I read it and I was like, wow, this is going to be very. And from what everyone has told me that's already read it, they said it's like extremely dark and unhinged.
Yeah.
It's
a lot
extremely
about
dark.
grief is what I'm seeing too.
I just don't want to ever be in the position where anybody connected to that case is in, because I don't want to lose somebody in that sense. But like, I also just think of all of these people that like were living their lives that like the internet completely took over for like months and months and like accused them of being a murderer. And like, turns out they like, like a guy like is walking them to their food truck because like he has like 2 women that he's friends with that are drunk, and he's like, I'm gonna walk them to the food truck so like I can be like a good guy and make sure nothing happens. And then the next thing you know, the internet is like accusing him of months and months of being a murderer. So
yeah, that's the
toxicity
of social media people.
The toxicity of like armchair detectives is something that I find really fascinating in crime fiction right now because it's so like apparent everywhere. Like Rabbit Hole.
Yeah.
Rabbit Hole by Kate Brody.
Let
me know when you need to sob.
Yeah.
Let me know when you need to sob. I threw it. I like finished it and I was like sobbing. Like my mom found me and she was like, what happened? Like, is everybody okay? And I'm like, no, I'm not okay. It's like a very emotional reaction to a book. But yeah, Rabbit Hole made me hysterically cry.
Yeah.
There's a lot of authors that owe you some emotional healing.
Emotional damage.
That's what like sticks with me. That's what like sticks with me. I just remember, I think it was like after I read Bright Young Women, I don't think I picked up anything for like 3 weeks. And I kept texting Kate and I was like, I don't know how I'm ever going to record a podcast with you ever again because like I don't know if I'm ever going to read again after this.
I'm done reading. And that was
done with it all.
Emotionally traumatized.
Yeah.
Well, I think you guys added a ton to everybody's TBRs. Definitely mine.
Yeah, and I want to check out that.
Excited.
Yeah, I want to check out that huge stack that you posted as well. And I'm just gonna like zoom in with my old eyes.
I'll try to make sure I do another good, run. I didn't even mention just real quick. Nick Medina has Indian Burial Ground. It's a sort of supernatural horror too. It's awesome. I think I mentioned it in the previous show when I was on. But his debut, Sisters of a Lost Nation, is also great. So there's 2 more to add to the TBR. And he's very, like, I bet he'll have another book out in 2025. 5. Like he's
Wow.
really, yeah. And he was in the anthology collection as well.
Oh,
Vanessa
nice.
Lit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Sisters
he's
of the
another good
Lost
one.
Nation is one I've been very curious about for a while.
Yeah, it's really good. And this one is cool too. It's kind of a dual timeline. And it's
I
got
love
this
that.
uncle and then a main character kind of converges. And there's some creepy, both like a vampire-like character, so familiar things, but then indigenous too. It's good.
Ooh.
It's good. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm
Okay.
intrigued.
All right. Sold. Sold. I'm going to have to get more jobs.
Right.
And more bookshelves. Yours
more
look really
bookshelves.
full, Gare.
I know.
They're a little full.
I know. Every time I go to like put one more, I'm like, I feel like it's like Jenga. I'm like, are the shelves going to come down on me this time or do I like survive another day? But so far they've held up.
Yes.
There's your nightmare for tonight. The bookshelves topple.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, that what a way to go. You know, like if I'm found the next morning, like covered, you know, like one
And-
hand is like dramatically draped across my forehead holding Blood Sisters and the other one's like up here holding Bright Young Women. Don't move me, just bury me like that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
He
how I want to
died
go.
as he lived.
Yes. Doing what
Covered
he
in
loved.
books.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to share the post we keep talking about of Vanessa's surrounded by books when this episode comes out. So everybody can go look at even more, not that you need more, but even more books for your TBR.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys for coming on.
Thanks for
This
having
was
me.
so fun. Thank you.
It was very fun.
guys.